So I was going out with this young man from Sri Lanka, and his parents were not in the country and absolutely terrified of the fact that he was dating this wild, lustful Western woman, whatever I was representing, you know what I mean? And like in the beginning, every time they knew I was over, like his mom called nonstop. Well, she wasn't that type of person, but if she knew I was around, like the phone would ring a lot, and it was just checking in. And then a few months down the line, she actually realized that I kept him very accountable, making sure all of a sudden he started paying his bills on time, like all these things that a proper woman does to you. And then she was like, wait a minute, she's actually not a bad influence to him. But that took a few months, and then it was really sweet, like, hey, tell her I said hi, and yada yada yada. But before that, she was terrified of this Western woman ruining her good traditional Sri Lankan son.
Welcome to yet another awesome episode of Living It Up in Lion City. I know it has been a while, and let's get started with something that a friend and I have been wanting to talk about for a long, long time now.
Very long time.
Yeah. And speaking of friend, welcome, Jasmin.
Thank you.
Yet again. It has been a while. Glad to have you here once more. And as you know, we've had a ton of conversations about, so our topic is about interracial dating. And it covers the whole gamut of interracial, intercultural, interethnic, and for the purposes of brevity, I'm categorizing it as interracial dating. So we've been talking about this for quite some time, and there's been we've had long conversations about this and some personal experiences, and I thought it'd be interesting for us to cover it, especially like in living in a place like Singapore. So it'd be interesting to weigh in on race, culture, and romance and all that stuff, right? So before we get started, I would like to show you a presentation. Just a bunch of fun stuff that could just serve as the context for what we talk about next.
Just in case we don't have any fun stuff. Something tells me we will. I'm ready.
So what I'm now going to do is... So, interracial dating, weighing in on race, culture, and romance in Singapore. So I thought I'd show you a bunch of fun stats that would be a great conversation starter.
Hit me.
Fun facts about interracial relationships. 10% of married couples in the US are interracial. As in its entirety. Like, all married couples, out of all the married couples, young, old, everything in between, only 10% are interracial.
Wow.
Versus in Singapore, where 22% of marriages in Singapore are interracial. And that was just 1 year, in 2018. It has been on the rise, for the longest time, and it's just going to get further. So essentially, it means that 1 in every 5 couples is interracial
in Singapore.
In Singapore, yes.
Unexpected.
Now, not so fun fact, but I think it serves some context as to when interracial relationships started being normalized and accepted, right? So France was, of course, the earliest. In 1792, they finally repealed all restrictions on interracial marriages. This was right after the monarchy was overthrown. So as part of the revolutionary new government, they were like, okay, equality for everyone and no discrimination.
In 1792.
In 1792, yeah. In 1945, of course, there was the Nuremberg laws, one of which was the law for the protection of German blood and German honor, and that was repealed.
Not proud of that one.
Yeah, but it serves as context, right? 1967 was the year when the US decriminalized interracial marriages. Before that, it was illegal to marry out of your race, and this was specifically for Caucasians. So Caucasians and black people were not allowed to get married.
But black and Latinos could have been married?
I tried looking for facts about that, but there was nothing much around it. So, and I think it just points to the idea that,
it wasn't really bothered with it.
Yeah, so it was like all that, they didn't want race defiling to apply to white people, and they didn't like the colored folks did not matter, right? Now, this is the most interesting fact for me. South Africa lifted the ban on sexual relations between blacks and whites only in 1985. And of course, and like right after apartheid was lifted, and South Africa became like it is a multicultural nation and all that stuff, but tensions still arise. There was a story in 2019 in a TV show where a black and white couple, they started kissing, and it caused an uproar on TV. People were like doing petitions online and all that stuff, and this was in 2019.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's still pretty an interesting state of affairs, if you are in an interracial relationship across the world. That said, fun facts about interracial marriages in Singapore. So what you're seeing here is the net total of all interethnic marriages in Singapore in the year 2018. This is from the SingStats website, which captures all data around marriages between the different races and groups. And this covers both civil marriage and Muslim marriage. There's two separate laws for it. And so one is under the Women's Charter, which is the civil one, and then you have the Muslim Charter, right? So if you look at the largest group, it is essentially other male and other female under the Muslim Charter. So essentially a whole bunch of people outside of CMIO, which is Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasians and stuff like that, a whole bunch of people have gotten married under the Muslim Charter. So someone of the Islamic faith is involved in all of these alliances, and that's like the largest group of interethnic marriages. The next highest is Chinese male and others female, which is 7.6% of all marriages in total. And this includes, monoculture marriages, right? So the largest well-defined ethnic group would be Chinese male and others female. Others comprises, anyone who is not Chinese, Malay, Indian, or Caucasian. So this would cover like Thai, Vietnamese, Japanese, Korean, and all that stuff. So that's like the largest group. Then, of course, you have Malay male and others female at 2%, and then from there it just goes down. So you can see other male, Malay female, Caucasian male, and Chinese female is like 2.2%. Indian male and Chinese female, I would come under that, is also 2%, and so on and so forth. So everything under 2% is fairly nominal, right? Now, to give context, I compiled all marriage stats, and this includes, monocultural marriages, so like Chinese male, Chinese female, and stuff like that. So as you can see here, of all the marriages, Chinese male and Chinese female is, of course, by far the largest grouping, right? So at 66%. And then you have Malay male and Malay female, both under civil and Muslim law, which is 16.5%. And then you have other male and other female, that ambiguous grouping in the previous slide, which is like 11%. And then it goes on forth. So Indian male and Indian female, which is the next monocultural major grouping, is at 5%, and then everything else is just all down. I started looking at this data simply because we hear all this stuff about this particular group is overwhelmingly paired with another particular group and all that stuff. And a lot of our friends makes those complaints and stuff like that, right?
And that does not reflect the assumption at all.
Yeah. Having said this, I talked with a bunch of data scientist friends, and they were like, there's a difference between marriage stats and dating stats. So interracial marriages are a subset of interracial dating, but it is not necessarily representative of it. So, like, if you were to get married to someone, for example, that is not representative of, let's say,
of my entire dating history.
So, and then a lot of other things come into play, like, probably at a particular time in your life where you want a specific person rather than what your, sexual preferences or dating preferences are. So I tried like showing this to my data scientist friends, and they're like, yeah, nah, this is not. Shut the fuck up. But I thought it was interesting regardless, it just gives at least one snapshot.
Keep in mind this is marriage and not representative of all dating history, and probably not what we're looking at when we walk around.
So that's what this is. Right. So now let's get to the crux of it. Now, before we get started, Jasmine, tell us a bit about yourself, and especially like about your time here in Singapore. How long you've been here?
Yeah. So I am 30 years old. I came the first time when I was 21 years old. Yeah. That's when we met.
Yeah.
So it's been quite some time. I was back home. I'm from Germany. I was back home for 3 years in between. So in total, I'm here for about 7 years now, with a little break in between. So I want to say almost all my 20s in Singapore, and most of my dating life has happened here overseas. And I will speak mostly about my experience, obviously, in a Singapore context.
Yeah.
I work in technology. I'm a white female, so I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation to speak to an Indian male and in your experiences. I have never dated a blonde, blue-eyed white man.
Okay.
So we're gonna have some material to talk about.
I'm curious to go deeper into that. Right. So I also just want to start with saying that, I'm an Indian. I'm an Indian national from India. Moved to Singapore in 2011. I've been single for, the first, 4 years of my life here. Now I'm happily not, which is great. So just dating has always been a struggle, especially if you're like in a big and dynamic city, and then it's not for the lack of finding people. It's just the very transient nature of dating, especially in expat circles. So that's been my experience for the most part. And of course, being Indian, it comes with its own set of interesting experiences and challenges. So I'm curious to talk more about that. So, Jasmin, let's start with you've heard about so dating here in Singapore. You have been here for a while. You've been going around. That's probably not the right word to use.
Oh yeah.
But tell us a bit about your dating experience, specifically around interracial relationships.
So I think I have a bit of a journey. I want to say also a personal growth journey, obviously, that we all have. Starting off with my first experiences when I was 21, 22, to now when I'm 30. Your expectations change. The way you go about dating changes. But I think I'd like to, to cut it to the chase. I've been dating brown and black men in Singapore. And maybe I'll start off with my very first experience, and that's not about a relationship per se, but just about me, going on a date with someone to go to the movies or grabbing dinner or, just being hit on back when the bridge was a thing. Yep. So I'm 21 years old. We're all sitting on a bridge, still drinking beer, doing our thing. And this guy, I don't remember. He was either Malay or Indian. It's a really long time. And he, we talk like a really quick intro. Hi, I'm Jazz. I'm 21. I'm from Germany. I'm this guy, and this is what I'm doing. He's like, all right, so should we go home? And I'm like, why are you tired? Like, why are we going home?
Right to the chase.
Yeah. And I think he was like, oh, I thought, that's how it works. Like, we will go home now. And I'm like, why would I go home with you now? Because I was really thinking we're having a great time. And like, why would I go anywhere? Or did you see the group we're here with? And I think it then hit him like, oh, that's not how it works. When I shared the story later with other people, I got the input that they thought, well, you're a blonde, white, Western woman. There is TV, media, and so forth there that makes a blonde white woman is represented very easy. So, and he seemed very uncomfortable the moment he realized that I'm very confused about his statement. So that might be a thing. It led further on to situations where I realized that I was kind of treated a bit like a trophy girl.
Yeah.
Not so much that they were all trying to get into my pants, but they dragged me along to every friend and showed me around way before it was serious and like very early getting to know each other faces. And so that was something that, looking back into my dating journey, I think has changed my approach as well. And that's going to be interesting because I'm talking to an Indian, but I have to say that it has definitely changed for me my interest in certain people or being more careful with certain people because, well, I'm a person like your brown sister and, your brown mom and your brown friends, and it doesn't matter what you take me out for, it shouldn't be for my color. So and I'm a helpless romantic and I'm a cornball and I want love and happiness and I don't want to be taken out for this. Like, I don't really care to be trophied. I think that's nothing anyone wants to achieve or go for on a date for. So I think that those early, like 1 or 2 years, changed my perception a little bit. It didn't stop me from dating brown men, by the way.
But you have this in your head. It's like, okay, the minute it gets to a point where he like alludes to, or at least does something that kind of points to you being a trophy white girl, you're like, okay.
Tap out.
You know, right.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That for sure. And then I had definitely the situation where I was going out. It was like a first date, and we were just going for a movie, and he was Malay, and he said, and again, we were like 22, 23, and he said to me, and he was really hyped about it, I've never had so many people looking at me than just going and buying a movie ticket with you. And I thought it was shit, but he was really excited about it. So it's like those, and he wasn't rude or anything, but it was like, wow, look at the stares that we're getting. And I'm like, yeah, no one needs this. While he was like, damn, you know, that's dope. So I think there's just, and that again, it's just in a perception of Singapore. That would I would say is like my starting point of like making experience of interracial dating in Singapore. Just noticing what we're looked at, and there's definitely a lot of attention I get for dating a brown man.
Yeah. So I have a question here, Jasmine. Like, has this always been the case with anyone that you've dated, or is it just like a specific subset of people? I mean, the reason why I ask is that we have mutual friends who have that particular, taste, I would say. You know, they have like a particular, for the lack of a better word, white girl fetish. And I just want to understand if that's like, are these the men that predominantly, interact and hit on you? Are these the men that you experience for the most part? Like, is it always about the white girl? Is probably my question.
So I get more approached by brown men.
Right.
I think so.
Okay.
But that might also be in Singapore. It's not the same in Germany. It's, I think, very common. I know a lot of white men here in Singapore that date Asian women. And I mean, they're beautiful and you're exposed to them. So I think it's almost a bit natural that you kind of go for what is exotic, because I do the same. So I wouldn't say that, a brown man hits on me because I'm the trophy per se. I think I just want to say that this was something that shaped my perception and how I went about dating because of those early experiences.
Right. So there's an interesting story from a friend who's also white, and the thing is that she's also always, dated, Indian men. She's married to an Indian man now. And a lot of people would always ask, like, oh, does she have like a brown man fetish? Does she have like this Indian fetish? And then I remember she once explained it as, no, I'm just a friendly person, and then I do have close Indian friends, and therefore I get to interact with a lot of Indian people. And she did mention that unlike other people from where I come from, I'm a lot friendlier, and so people warm up to that more, and that just opens up the doors to having
connection,
intimate relations with more brown men or Indian men, because it could be the case with Asian people, it could be the case anywhere. Just the fact that she's being friendly at a specific point in time with a specific bunch of friends, opens that up, right? So she's aware of the fact that it's, people look at it as a fetish, but for her it's just the opportunity, So I found that an interesting take, but
I think it's just that for some reason, and I'd like to hear your take and your side of it, but for some reason, there's a lot of interest in when a white woman doesn't choose to date a white man. What I get most attention for is dating a black man.
Okay.
Not just in Singapore, but definitely in Singapore, because I think it's more common to have a conversation about race. In Germany, no one was bothered about me having a black man.
Right.
But here I think talking about this fetish thing, one thing that I come across all the time is, so tell me, are you dating a black man because of the dick?
Wow.
And I think...
Is that like the first question? Hey, Jasmine, how are you doing? By the way.
No, that's the first question once they have a drink down. And it doesn't matter, like, it could be a colleague, it could be like a, not someone who I consider a close friend, but for me, I just find that honestly very insulting, because I'm not someone who sleeps around. I am someone who's in relationships, and if you ask me that about my man and my relationship, my sex life, that's my intimacy, you know,
Yeah.
like that's none of your fucking business. And to be honest, if he wasn't black, you would never ask me about his dick size. And that is just something that I face, and that reminded me of her story of like, so you like Indian guys? What
Yeah.
for? I get that with black men, and I find it insulting, and I'm always wondering, like, why do you think this is your business? You
Yeah,
would like
it's
imagine I introduce you to my boyfriend, my black boyfriend, and you go, "Oh, Jazz, it was so nice meeting him. By the way, how large is his dick?"
I mean, it's worthy small talk in my opinion. I'm joking.
But you know what
no.
I'm like, you and me, we talk about, you know, what do we think is good sex or what is needed, and stuff like this might comes up. But this is clearly to the race thing, and it comes up from any race and any nationality, and I think there is, with every race, like Indians, whatever they are perceived for, whatever black people are looked at, that always gets thrown back at us when we date that
Yep.
that color or that nationality. Is like, okay, so is it because of that? And I think she gets that too, for, you know, why are you dating an Indian man?
Yeah.
You know,
So I think like stereotypes play a huge part in it, right? So there's like, you know, positive stereotypes, negative stereotypes, weird stereotypes, and, you know, overly intrusive stereotypes, you know, especially in your example, right? I mean, of course, and everybody's gonna, like, you know, base their judgment of a couple or a romantic relationship on these stereotypes that they often probably don't think too much about. And I guess, especially here in Singapore, since you bring this up, I noticed that, you know, the topic conversations around race are like, it's all the time. Like it's always about race. So race is like a personality trait at this point in time, you know. So it's like there's certain cultural attributes that are applied to race, and then it's like the constant talk about race, you know, sometimes makes me go, you know, we're people, you know.
actually, you saying that reminds me of something. Let's say I just joined a new team and go for in a new job in a new company, and you know, you grabbed lunch with the team, everyone's getting to know each other, so you're in a relationship. Yeah, I am. In Singapore is the only place where the first question is asked, where is he from?
Yeah.
And then if I let's say it's Singaporean, then it's like, oh shit, now we gotta ask
Yeah.
what race. But
Yeah.
we're getting to it next. Like,
You can
no,
see that some are too polite to ask, but it's like it's on their head. They're like when to ask? When to
Absolutely.
ask? Like, what's a good opportunity to, you know?
absolutely. So I'd never had anyone in Germany asking me where my boyfriend is from or what color of skin like what color he has. That's never. No one ever asked me that. But here, that's second question for sure.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. Like sometimes, like I've gotten used to it because I do understand that it's not out of malicious intent. It's not like trying to just figure you out. It's just become part of small talk. So I've gotten used to it. But sometimes it's like, really? Is that something we want to know right now?
I do have a feeling though, and I hope I don't get killed for that. But I feel like when my expat friends ask me that, it's more out of interest to just be like, hey, where's she from? Because, you know, I just want to know what her background is and how you guys met. Like, genuine curiosity of the person. You know, how long has she been here? If she's an expat and stuff like this. I feel like those questions are slightly different from Singaporeans asking me.
In what sense?
There's
for
just
it.
I think there's just this interest of, you know, what is this white girl looking for in a man here? Or like, I don't know. I feel it's not so much of what kind of, I don't know. It's not so much of an interest of that individual that I'm dating, like what I just described. How long is this person here? You know, how did you meet? How did this person grow up? Because a country does give a little bit of information about that.
Yeah.
It's more about, I think, status. You know, what type, because in Indian and Malay and Chinese, there are different statuses here in Singapore that are given for it. Exactly. So I think that is more implied. And I'm just saying that's the sense and the vibe that I'm giving out of the questions that are different for me from when a friend asks me, where's this person from that you're dating?
I mean, Jasmine, I'm guessing that so usually when you talk about having a relationship, and this happens to me a lot, where it's like, you know, so the default assumption is that, you know, my partner is Indian, right? So it's like, so the questions that I get are usually like, oh, are you married? I'm like, at least at the time I was like, no, but I have a partner. And it's like, oh, is she from India too? And I'm like, no, she's Singaporean. And then you can see like the veins pop. It's like
working, yeah.
Which race? Right? And then it's like, oh, you mean like Singaporean Indian at an opportune, interval of time, and then Chinese. And then the other vein just pops like, how did they meet? Like, where did they meet? So it's like, I think there's like certain default stereotypes that are associated with different races, and then if you step just a little outside of that, it's like they have to know about you. They have to know the circumstances behind it and all that. I'm not saying that this is a uniquely Singaporean thing. This happens in a lot of places, and I dare say this happens in multicultural societies. Where it's always going to be about finding differences.
Not are
and
we
stuff.
a multi-race country, like where Singaporeans are multi-race, but we're also a country with like nearly 40% expats. So I think it's more normal.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think that's the positive side.
Yeah.
People talking about this and this openness and this interest is not malicious.
Yeah.
But it can sometimes go into the status.
Yeah.
Into that rank or, that kind of motivation of the question.
It could also be novelty, to be honest, because I think, like, in a lot of ways, I don't believe that a lot of people look at, pegging you on what particular socioeconomic status or whatever, but it's like sometimes there's novelty. So, for example, I'm an Indian man, if I were with, let's say, a black woman who, in Singapore, black people are a rarity. So if I were with a black woman, for example, I would definitely get stares and it's not like in the sense that, oh, what's this black woman doing here? It's just like more like, what? Like, there's a black woman who is, a rarity by herself. And then with an Indian man, it's like, what is going on? How did they meet? Like, is it yoga? Could it be that?
Yoga?
And so, people tend to have like a set of internal questions in their head and they try to figure out where you stand. And I kind of enjoy that sometimes because I love having people ask me questions of this sort and I just say no. So it's like, oh, is your partner Indian? I say no. And then it's like, but and then like when they finally get around to asking the next question, it's like, oh, is she Singaporean? I'm like, yes. And then it's like, answer the next question.
Once you've explained and you told your story, how do they react? Is it like, do you feel it's like a positive surprise or, like what's the response?
And I'll use an example. This happened in Batam a while ago. We went wakeboarding. And they had to take our passports for identity purposes and all that. So, they put the passports, both mine and Selena's, in their office. And so I went to the office to collect it. So I was like, okay, my name's Rindo, Indian passport, that's me. And then my girlfriend's too, which is Selena's. And then so he sees the red passport and it's like, oh, Singaporean. And then he looks inside and, so he sees her face and, she's Chinese. And he goes, and I'm like, okay then, So there is a prevalent sense that, as an
you
Indian
made it.
man, yeah, So it's like somehow, like she's the trophy, like especially for an Indian man who's also an Indian national. He's like, yeah, man, you got it. This dude he's a Singaporean dude, so it's a Singaporean who's running that wakeboarding place. So and that's just one example. There's a whole bunch of little things like this that kind of make people go like, oh. Here's an Indian national who has,
but
taken a step above the rest.
Exactly. So for you, it's like you made your way up, and so which is a bit odd. I think
it's a little disturbing for me because it's like we got together because we fell in love, but that somehow just gets lost in all of these hierarchical questions and shit.
Exactly. Because I think for me it's different. For me, it's like the exact opposite. So at the time I was in a relationship with a Singaporean who is half Indian, half Ghanaian. Mm-hmm. And when I would tell someone that, after being asked, obviously, don't have to wait too long for the question, then it would always...
Right. Oh, my God.
Then it would always be like, she's integrating. She's with our people.
Right.
That's what I would get. I feel like it's like she knows a local dish. She's dating a local man, Like, guys, I've been here for 7 years,
Colorful metaphor aside. Oh my God. I mean,
but what I feel like for me it's like this whole wow, she's entering the local fields and dating, and for you it's like you made your way up.
So
It's a bit different, you know what I mean?
It is, because I think this is something that I generally notice, and at the risk of making generalizations, I think there is a belief that, the Caucasian population tend not to integrate, and that's okay because there's an expectation that they have their own little, bubble, but anyone who gets out of it is like, oh, yeah, like anything that you do outside of that, stereotypical expat bubble is considered a win. So it's like, oh yes, she's one of us now. She's taking the time to be part of us and all that stuff. I think it's slightly different from me in the sense that as an Indian national, as an Indian man, living in a country with a significant Indian population, I do not have that specific novelty factor. I'm not going to get into like the litany of stereotypes, around Indian citizens from India and stuff like that. But, so there's an expectation that I have to integrate. So it's like the little things that you do would not get the same much, oh, good job, man. And this kind of trickles down into dating too, so it's like...
That is so spot on. Yeah. You are expected to integrate. And for me, it's like, oh honey, thank you that you actually joining Singapore, and you know what I mean? Like, because if I wanted to, I could perfectly live my Western life here. I mean, we all know these groups of expats that do that, right? Every time I tell people that lots of my friends are Singaporeans and most of my friends are Indians or Sri Lankan, it's like, good on you.
Like,
and I'm like, someone
she's
give me a
imbibing the
badge for
local
this.
culture. Oh my gosh, she's one of us and all that.
It's not like I went out there to find you guys, like I just went, I bonded with people and you guys became my friends, It's not like I was like, oh, you're Indian. Hi, I'm Jazz. Can we become friends?
Oh my God, that would be just so funny.
You're going to be like, okay.
Oh man. But no, but that's the thing. I do recognize that this is larger than just dating. I mean, there's like a larger social construct around it.
Absolutely.
But that's kind of how it is, right? So as an Indian national, of course, living in a fairly cosmopolitan city, dating hasn't been a problem. There are certain, how do I put this? There are certain stereotypes, that kind of affect how people initially judge you. In my personal experience, it's nothing that can't be overcome with a bit of wit and charm. So it's like, at least in my opinion, this is something that I generally tell, fellow Indian friends who more often than not talk about struggles with dating. And I totally understand, where they're coming from and stuff like that. It's like, if you're passively good looking, if you are socially affable, if you are being funny helps. Like, if you have all of those things, you can overcome them. It sucks that this exists, and also in a country and a city where race tends to be like part of regular discourse. It is kind of unfortunate, but once again, it's not that big of a hoop to overcome. That's just me though. I'm with you on it, but then so I think that's like the interesting part about putting the two of us into this conversation. I'm going to bring up a topic that you're very well aware of. So, as I mentioned earlier, I had these experiences of like being potentially like this trophy girlfriend and stuff like this, and I haven't had that in years because I was in my early 20s. You learn, how to approach, you take your time dating, and filter out who's real for you and all that stuff. So that's for me just early journey. But what did happen, and that's not too long ago, that might just be 2 to 3 years ago, is a friend of ours that is Indian who I thought was a really close friend of mine, who then went out to tell people that we had something sexual, which never ever happened. And that hit me much harder than any little going on 2 dates and then having to cut it off because it wasn't for the real reasons. But this was someone who I considered my friend for a long time. And even though I knew he was into white women and there's nothing wrong with that, knowing that this talk was going on behind my back, and that was something that really cut deep, and that. And what do you do? Like, let's say you approach a woman and then she tells you, I don't want to have anything to do with you because I've experienced this type of stuff. Like, that's why I'm saying, I think why it's interesting, because I'm very open dating any type of race, but I also think that you sometimes, or Indians, fall victim of other Indians
doing this kind of stuff that's not correct?
So I mean, we have to address the fact that, social proof tends to override any, so at least in the case that you were talking about, a friend that we know, the social proof is worth more than, the friendship that he had with you. That sucked. That really, really sucked. And I have to admit, this is something that's quite, I don't know if it's prevalent, but I have seen this. And I wouldn't say it's specifically to Indian men, but I think it's a friend once, made a joke in India a long time ago. It was like, no, we're just recolonizing. It's not a fetish, it's recolonizing. So that made sense, because it's like, he was like, hey man, the white man has been establishing dominance in our country for 400 years. It's our turn now. Let's start with the women. It is a joke and all that stuff, but it does point to something that, social proof is a heady feeling. And I'll be very honest with you. My first interracial relationship was in India, and it was with a white woman. It was with someone from France. And when she would come over, the landlord was just baffled. The thing is, okay, so I've brought, former partners before and all that stuff, and he's always been kind of uncomfortable about that, being from a very conservative place and all that. So it's like the landlord is in the ground floor, and I'd be on the top floor. So I'd walk up there, and then he'd see girls.
Better no bed squeaking.
And he's like, and all this stuff. And that was with Indian girls, right? And then when I brought this person, he was like, he didn't even have time to, put on the disappointed stare.
Fix his face, he was just processing, yeah.
He was like, what? What did I just see right now, So, and I will be honest, I kind of enjoyed that particular, surprise that I see around me and stuff like that. And especially in a city, especially in India, where you don't see that kind of relationships that much. It was interesting, I will say. It did come with its own set of challenges. There was one thing that you mentioned about how the guy at the bridge, went up to you and was like, yeah, so let's go home. And all that stuff. So it's like, because apparently he got all of his dating experience from Pornhub. Yeah. Right? And so similar things have happened for her. It was a bit of a struggle, because there's this expectation that, so here's a woman who's with an Indian man, so it's like she's down for anything. That means that, I can just come up to her, regardless of the fact that I'm just sitting right next to her, and, make a move or do some weird shit and all that stuff.
Shit.
So
yeah.
I got really protective and stuff, and then she got annoyed by that, and there's a whole other bunch of bullshit that happened because of it. So yeah, those are things that
actually
exist.
Reminds me of another thing, which would be an interesting topic to mention in this. Parents. So I was going out with this young man from Sri Lanka, and his parents were not in the country and absolutely terrified of the fact that he was dating this wild, lustful Western woman, whatever I was representing, you know what I mean? And in the beginning, every time they knew I was over, his mom called nonstop. Well, she wasn't that type of person, but if she knew I was around, the phone would ring a lot. And it was just checking in. And then a few months down the line, she actually realized that I kept him very accountable, making sure all of a sudden he started paying his bills on time, all these things that a proper woman does to you. And then she was like, wait a minute, she's actually not a bad influence to him. But that took a few months. Yeah. And then it was really sweet. Hey, tell her I said hi and yada, yada, yada. But before that, she was terrified of this Western woman ruining her good traditional Sri Lankan son.
Did you know exactly what was the cause of a concern? I mean, outside of the stereotype.
Sex.
Oh, right, okay. So it's
Absolutely.
Right. I mean...
And it's we were mid-20s, not 14, and I showed up in negligee. It wasn't that, But...
there's a sadder version of this story, and this is also a mutual friend of ours. I mean, for reasons of privacy, I'm not going to specify where they're from and all that. But I will say that the man is from a South Asian country, and this woman is from a European country. So they were going out for 4 years, and even after 4 years, the dude never mentioned or talked about her to his family. And she always had a problem with this because it's like, we've been together for 4 years. Like, we're in it for the long term. Like, why are you not talking about me to, your family? And then the dude has visited her family, back in that European country and all that stuff. And so she was like really struggling with it. And then one fine day, he, revealed why he had to do this. He was like, oh, I have a sister of a marriageable age. And if, the society in my country, in my village, finds out that I'm dating someone who's European, this wild Western woman, it would be a stain on my sister's reputation, and I want her to get married first before I can do anything. And then our friend was like, fuck this shit, and then she just, broke it off, because that was just such an unkind thing to do, but it also points to very strong social pressure, from family, from the people around you. Like, it blew my mind, but at the same time, I kind of understood it, because I come from India, I come from Kerala.
You see both sides.
Yeah, we do see a lot of those conservative families and stuff like that. But that's the shit that happens, right? And that's something that we, often don't talk about, I guess. And, especially if you were in that same experience, like, you'd be like, I mean, at least she had the good grace to just break it off with grace and do stuff. Like, you'd be like kicking and shouting, and you'd probably fly all the way to that country. It's like, what the fuck, mom-in-law? So, but there's all those politics. And speaking of parents, there's one thing that I'm not sure if this is a pattern or something. Interracial dating, especially in Singapore, is a lot less of a novelty among the foreigner crowd, because I don't know, I mean, for many reasons, we're strangers in strange land. We're a lot more open to, meeting and stuff like that. And I'll be honest, when I first moved here, I was lonely as fuck. So that just, encouraged me to go out and meet people and stuff like that. Versus, I'm guessing that when it comes to Singaporeans or people here who live with their parents, there's probably something similar. Not in the very uber conservative sense of, I should not date a woman who will take my virginity at the age of 25 because my mom still believes that, and that kind of shit.
And she's Western, so she must be a porn star.
Right? But at the same time, I think there's something to be said about, wanting to bring a girl home to your parents, and there's probably like a reluctance to do that versus if we were just hanging out, for example, and if I met like a really nice girl, I'd be like, hey, come over and do that stuff. So I think there's like a lot more freedom of movement, and that's why.
But that's also different layered in terms of expectations. If I bring someone home back in Germany, my mom doesn't expect me to get married to this person. My mom is very clear that first of all, she knows I respect my body, and she taught myself to value myself and all that stuff. So she knows I choose someone good. But we also are very clear that as soon as this person hurts me, he's out. Like, we're never mentioning his name again, and that's in the past. There is no figure it out and get married kind of thing, which might be a little bit different here. If I'm Singaporean and I bring someone home, my family is like, all right, tell me about your family.
That he's here
exactly.
for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, and obviously,
if not for good.
Yeah, I mean, I think and that's something that you see a lot, where it's like, you don't bring someone that you just met like last week, but to be fair,
I didn't do that at home as well.
Like,
but I know my mom. I'm 30 years old. My mom has never asked me when I'm gonna get married.
Right.
My mom knows I want to, and I want to have a family one day and whatever. And she said, I'm happy once it happens, but there's no way ever that my mom will bring that up as an expectation.
Okay.
Like,
you're lucky.
never ever.
You're really lucky.
I think that's not too uncommon for my country.
Interesting. Like, my parents were fairly liberal, and I remember my dad saying this a long time ago. He's like a super chill guy, but at the same time, he did something that was kind of low-key racist. He was like, oh, no, it's cool that you're going out and doing all these things and all that stuff. It's cool that you're meeting new people, imbibing new cultures. That's kind of euphemism for just, getting whatever. And he was like, yeah, but, if you're going to settle down, find someone who speaks your language, who is where you're from, because I would like to just be a lot more comfortable around this, potential bride. So I was like, that's racist, Dad.
Is it though?
So this is
because my mom did the same thing. I had the conversation with my mom where I said, Mom, did it I got one sister, older sister, only dated German men and will forever, because I hope this is the last. Mark, it's time for you to do the move. And so I once asked my Mom, would you want for me to just bring home a German man? Like, did it ever bother you knowing that I'm always dating outside my race? And my mom was like, I don't give a shit as long as that man treats you right.
Okay.
But I'd appreciate if he speaks German. It just would make things so much easier. Yeah. So that's how she said it. Like, you should have seen her, when...
Being, like, really careful about it. It's like...
my very first Singaporean boyfriend that came visiting me. And you should have seen the two in the kitchen, because he, Malay Singaporean, was asking my mom for the tax system in Germany. And she with her okay English and he with his major Singlish, and just watching them two talking about something complex like the damn tax system, I was just like, I'm going to sleep, you two do your thing. But my mom just wanted to welcome this person into the family, so I don't think it was racist. She was just like, it just would have been nice if they speak German.
I mean,
so that's why I'm like, maybe your dad just really says it's just nicer and easier to integrate the person.
Yeah, so it's like, see, that's the thing, right? Because it's like, of course, like when I call dad, my dad racist, it is a joke. It's like, oh, dad, you're racist. I'm just going to go around and get as much as I want. But like, the thing was, I don't think it was a question of language difficulties, at least in his case. I think it was just more about, I'm in the last years of my life. I can't deal with having
to adjust to something new,
novel, and all that. I like the same fucking breakfast every day for the rest of, to the end of my life, because it's like, I've done everything, I've gone everywhere. And it's not like he's a very provincial dude. Like, he's, we grew up outside of, India.
Yeah.
He has gone around a lot, and he is a very cosmopolitan person. But towards the end of his life, he's like, I'm just tired, man. And like, in my opinion, I still think that it's low-key racist, because he is too lazy to even accommodate for certain differences, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he said that, facetiously. Maybe he said that as a joke, but I don't know. It just pointed to a certain, I don't want to deal with new stuff. And if someone's going to come here, it's going to be a struggle for me. And he may not be hateful, but he's going to be insensitive about it.
Yeah.
So
I think maybe where you feel what you consider racism may be this whole, why look at that as something complicated or extra work? You should just welcome this person no matter, no matter what. Like,
I could be with an Indian person and that would still be fucking complicated, Yeah, so it's like, why is like a certain cultural affinity considered, easier? And okay, once again, now that I just put this out in words, there is truth to it. Language plays a part, as your mom said. Language plays a part. Cultural affinity plays a part. At the same time, I do wish that everybody just put some thought into, or at least put the person first. So it's like culture and race, all well and good. Those are like nice bonuses to have, but as your mom put it, as long as he treats you right, as long as this woman is good for me, that should be the overriding criteria, especially from parents,
agreed.
So and since we are on the topic of parents,
my mom is the best.
Oh, well,
Just gonna say that. I mean, every example so far, she's pretty dope.
No, that's great. And I think, like, especially since we were talking about, our friends' parents and stuff, these stories tend to be a little difficult. And I see this among our friends here in Singapore too, where parents have certain ideas of, who their children's partners need to be, and it's a bit, it's not normal for them. Like, they still look at interracial relationships as a novelty, and it depends on who that person is, and then it could either be like novel in a fun way or novel in a weird, should I do this or should I be part of this way, So, and that would be a good segue into interracial and interethnic relationships in Singapore. Do you think they are novel? Do you think it's a novelty?
I guess it kind of depends on... I'm a bit 50-50 on it.
Okay.
I mean, obviously for me, you know where I stand, but I think it's like how it, like the country perceive it. I would like to say no, because, there is always this whole multiracial. We should always embrace that. That's how Singapore likes to be branded, right? But underneath that, older generations, it's a very different feel.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you in many respects on this. Although I will say that it does veer towards it being more normal than usual. I mean,
think with every generation it will
yeah,
get
it just
easier.
gets, yeah. So
I
like
mean,
the stats that we saw earlier, like 22%, 22% is crazy when you think about it, right? So I was looking at the stats, so it's like it's been ramping up every year. At the same time, there's always going to be these little intergenerational conflicts. And my personal belief is that you can never have a multicultural society without these conflicts. It's always going to be there. You know, there's going to be some of these frictions, and that's to be expected. The idea is to make sure that that does not become the overriding factor that affects relationships further down the line. So at least as far as Singapore and Singaporeans are concerned, you know, among the, how do I put this, established races, not, you know, it's like, oh, Chinese Indian, no worries, Chinese Malay, no worries, this and all that stuff. When it comes to probably races and cultures outside of the CMIO thing, that's when things get pretty interesting. You know, like I was watching this video by Rice Media where they talk about what does a Singaporean really mean. You know, who is a real Singaporean? And there was one girl who is, you know, half black and half Chinese. And, you know, so she talks about her struggles and stuff like that and what her parents had to go through. And so I'm 50-50 on the point where I think it's normal as long as you're within CMIO.
yeah.
But once you're outside of that, then it's like, whoa, you know, does he have a big dick? You know, like, is she a porn star?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Right? So, I don't know. There's, it's actually pretty interesting. There is a lot of interracial couples I know who, like, from the previous generation. So it does point to a normalcy in a way, you know? So, yeah, that's there.
Yeah, and it will continue to get easier because these couples have children that are used to coming from two different cultures
Yeah.
and identifying as two different races, and you won't be able to take that away from them, and they're going to be very relaxed with that moving forward. And, you know, I think, so it's always going to get better.
Yeah.
Obviously. So, and I'm saying we're still in a bit of a 50-50. And it is still a country that holds onto a lot of tradition, which I think is beautiful. And with it comes a little bit this whole status question. I think that's the difficult part about it.